it's another tremendous opportunity today on the Emite podcast to get a little bit more involved in what we do behind the scenes to help customers understand and organize their data. And today, our guest is Stephen Smith, one of the pivotal players behind the scenes at Emite. My name is Kollman Gearhart. I'm an account executive that operates out of the West for North America. And I would love to interview and spend some time today with Stephen. So Stephen, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Of course. Hello, everyone. So my name is Stephen Smith. So I am the Senior Solutions Consultant for EMEA. So I look after the entirety of Europe and the Middle East, supporting all our Emite customers.
Excellent. And when it comes to one of the big talking points that we see either in EMEA or North America, the kind of introduction to what we do as an analytics company and why we would be of value to a business or organization looking to, maybe they just migrated to the cloud and they're looking to have a little bit of understanding organizationally to where they can have each one of their departments communicate with one another on a single one-stop shop or platform like a dashboard that we provide here at Emite. So I'd love for you to start. When I say data centralization, what does that mean for you as a lead SA in the world of analytics?
Yeah, of course. So as you can understand with any contact center, there are a wide range of platforms that are used by the team, by the front-end agents, by back-office teams. And you've always got CCaaS platforms, so Genesys, Amazon are always trying to centralize as much of the interactions as possible. So to pull in calls, emails, chat, SMS into one place. And they very much focus on that as an omni-channel proposition. Everything comes out of one platform. The problem you run into is that's almost never the only system that a business is trying to use. So when you're looking to do reporting across the entire contact center operation, it's not all just done through their CCaaS platform. A really obvious one is something like a CRM. So Salesforce, Dynamics, everyone always has one or has a similar version where they store customer interactions and maintain records that's not part of their CCaaS. So straight away, things like that, or things that generate revenue, where you do bookings, where you do admin processes, all the things that an agent would look to do or look to utilize in their day-to-day operation is something that is going to generate data, and you're going to want to understand what is happening with that information. So in Emite, when we talk about data centralization, our key focus is always from the CCaaS out. We always do that first. It's the ability to get real-time metrics and a lot of the consolidated information across the entire suite, because again, CCaaS is every single one of them is a big platform.
Right.
But it's all the other data sources that go along with that to be able to bring everything together under one place. So for us, it all comes under Emite, and then you can report on them all together. You have one central place for reporting. You have one central place for your measurements, for your calculations, and allowed to derive all your different insights from that single place.
Yeah, the one-stop shop. I've heard it called a data pool, an ocean, or whatever is the best way to term it, right? But to get everything into one place. But a lot of the conversations I'm seeing, Stephen, from potential customers is, okay, once I get that data into one place, what are some ways that you guys as an organization can help me organize the data? How am I going to be able to filter it, to be able to have ease of use, to see what I want to see, and to have that cross collaboration amongst the organizations? When it comes to viewing that data effectively, can you talk a little bit more about, once it's in one place, what we can do here at Emite?
Yeah, definitely. We have visualization tools so the ability to build out graphs and charts and reports and tables, and to be able to visualize that data. What I tend to say is, once it exists in Emite, regardless of what source it's coming from, it's now essentially, it's not siloed anymore. It's all in one place. So if you want to report on all that together, you want to report on it in a single page, you want to combine cross-correlation. Yeah. So from one system to another, how much revenue have you generated in Salesforce compared to how many interactions did an agent do in Genesys, for example? Can we correlate that to give a rolling average? And it's that kind of the kind of visibility you look to be able to provide, that it means that you can see everything together in one screen. The key takeaway as well is is the recency of that information, or how often we get that on the cadence. So what you tend to find, and it'll come up as sometimes comes up as a question, is data teams try to do this if they utilize Snowflake or a data lake or Power BI. They'll pull information in from these different sources and try and provide centralized reporting. And that happens quite regularly across big organizations. The challenge you run into is, one, it's really hard to provide intraday data. Usually they receive things like exports as the day concludes, so everything's one day behind. So it's great for month to day or long-term planning, but when you look on today and allow your managers to have insights they can use on the floor, it's really hard to get that information. The second problem is reporting teams are big and they're almost always overstretched. They're the ability, you go to someone and say, I need this report. We have a short-term incentive. We're running for our agents for the next 4 weeks. We need a report to support that. And the team goes, we'll see you in 8 weeks when we can even look at it, because that's just how busy the reporting teams are. Obviously, data is central to any large organization. So the ability for us not only to provide that information in emite in real time or intraday, but also the ability for agents and users to self-serve. They can create their own pages, they can generate their own measures. They don't, all in a code-free environment, so they don't need a reporting team. And it's actually done to supplement what the reporting team do. Their information and data and analytics is highly valuable, and we never look to replace the data team. It's usually just a supplement. You take away all of those different requests that come in from users who just want to be able to generate information that's interesting to them, or that they're trying to drive performance within their particular team, or they've discovered something they're trying to investigate. Instead of having to go into a wider central backlog, they're just free to go and create things as they wish and be able to understand what's going on.
Yeah, you said some really, I think, important things there. Streamlining the data, having the nimble and versatility to organize it in such a way to have it be powerful within an organization. You did bring up the ability to do that within the organization without having a helping hand per se from emite. We can help with that on the training side and set the expectations and guidelines. But to your point, there's a lot of value in the tool to be able to take it and run with it as an organization, and to maximize it based off of every single situation is customized, right? There's not one fit or finish. Everyone's different. But the point of this is that organizational alignment. Everything that I hear about from owners or folks that are in operations or contact center is they want to have a better experience with the customer journey. Being able to tell a story based off of how they're performing from an agent to where that customer is being taken care of, making sure that the calls are being picked up in a timely fashion, making sure that questions are answered in a timely fashion to get to a point to where they're really easy to do business with. So when I say that, and knowing when you're in the trenches to try to help these customers on a day in and day out basis, how important is it from an agent perspective to have something utilized like a scorecard to be able to have measurables that the supervisors can work with them on to continue to maximize that customer experience?
So it's incredibly important. It really speaks to the different challenges I talked about with various different parts of the system and different parts of the operation, and things that make up a agent's performance, how you deem that they are being successful, and they're always measured on the various different aspects they interact with. So agent scorecards have become highly important for agent performance across any of the contact centers, really. You always have the basics of call quality to be able to evaluate calls that have taken place, and now more and more platforms will do it with AI as well, use speech analytics to get more of the calls. But it's always a holistic view of an agent. It's great that they took calls and they adhere to their guidelines of those calls, or emails or chats, that they stayed within the frameworks they were supposed to. But how easy were they to interact with? How pleasant were they? How well was the customer looked after? How good was their operation? How was their query solved first time, or was the agent not able to solve that based on their own training gap and had to come back? These things are the kind of information that you're trying to understand for each of your agents. How successful are they being? Are they being utilized correctly? Are there training gaps? Or The other side of it is agents who are incentivized based on this. And it's important because I've got some examples I want to be talking about, but based on bookings, based on revenue, and having these different things tied into whether they're eligible or not, that come from different parts of the system. If you've got CSAT surveys being driven from an external system, and you've got revenue coming from somewhere else, and the calls they take, and they're all coming from different places, every organization is trying to get, it's coined as a 360-degree view of their agent performance. Everything the agent does in the course of a day, can we measure, track, and then correlate that into the goal? That the kind of the perfect idea is to have one single measure or metric to say, this is how well my agent's performing, taking everything else into account from all these different places, so you can really easily, quickly see, rather than they did okay here, but they failed here, they're above here, but they're over here. So overall, how are they doing?
Right.
And that's where the challenge comes in.
Yeah, you said some really important things there, Stephen, especially when it comes to the traditional approach of manually gathering data for agent scorecards, because I think we've seen just about some of the most unique kind of legacy, old school type of mentality with operations of how to gather this information and piecemeal it together, and the amount of time that it takes to create those types of processes, to where if you had a one-stop shop, something more efficient with a scorecard type of model. I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit more about some of the traditional ways you've seen it done, and how you were able to maybe get them to see the light of the importance of having the ability to utilize an analytics tool like emite.
Yeah, definitely. So there's two clients in particular who've really taken advantage of agent scorecards. They came to us with scorecards they were already doing, and they have different behaviors, and I'll share my screen in a minute to show.
Awesome.
But they had the same challenges, which was it required immense amounts of manual effort to collate and maintain. It required the ability to refresh that data and circulate it out to agents, and it took the reporting staff away from other work. But it's so important. One, we just talked about how important it is for agent performance. But one of them in particular, it ties to the bonus incentive that the agents are paid every month. So it's vital, and they have to go and get information from these different places, and that needs to be done. So it takes hours and hours of time every single month, and then you start a new month, new incentive, and it starts all over again. And the fact that they have to constantly do that and constantly update it is a huge burden for them. So the key request they came to us with was, can you help with this? That's the beginning. That's the problem statement. They didn't come saying, can you build us an agent scorecard? Both versions, when I show them, have got better visually. They are much better now on emite than they were, because a lot of it was manual in Excel and things like that. But the key part was this requires incredible amounts of time, and it's not convenient for our managers and our agents to work with. We have to constantly circulate it. Can you help improve that? Which is exactly what we did.
You bring up a good point that it's very challenging to build something to where you don't understand the nuances of one's business, and the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are for one agent of one organization might be completely different for another organization. But if you had to think of kind of the standard KPIs that you're seeing from organizations that are important for them to help meet the criteria of the agent success, hit those bonuses, and also maintain an ideal customer journey, what are some of the KPIs that you're seeing that are important?
Universally, you always see CSAT and quality. Like I say, quality is their interaction evaluations. It's not just calls anymore. So the evaluations that are done, because not only do they look at soft skills and if the business has implemented new ways of approaching calls or problems, that the agent is adhering to that, but it also covers things like compliance. If you're in an insurance-based industry, you've got to read a compliance statement when you're starting, so that at the beginning you will pass or fail a quality if you do or don't say it. And those things are how businesses help maintain compliance of quality. Because if you have slips where it's not said, the important thing is to be able to recognize those, to be able to know that the feedback's going back in, training's being done, and it's how you police yourselves so that any governing bodies don't do it for you, is essentially the point. And everyone knows that. You've got regulations to hit, and it's hard. Agents at the end of the day are people,
Yes.
We do a lot of stuff with AI, you do a lot of stuff with automation, but at the end of the day, when it goes to a human person, there is margin for error. And there's the fact that you have to make sure that they're keeping what they're doing. So quality never goes away, and it never will. As long as you have agents, you need to make sure that you're maintaining. Like I said before, more businesses are using speech analytics. So instead of doing 4 or 5 calls for an agent in a month just to make sure they're maintaining, you do a cross section, you go, we're going to do 40% of their calls because we're going to automatically have an AI bot run through for compliance statements, for soft skills, things like that. The other big one is CSAT. CSAT is the other major one, is because, again, the only reason a business sends out CSAT surveys is to understand how their customers are perceiving interactions with them. And that's the key. There's other ways to do it. You go on social media and you look at sentiment and what's coming through on there, and that's great. But at the end of the day, if you have a call and you might say, oh, you did that call great as an agent. How do you know how the customer perceived that? And CSAT or post-call surveys or post-interaction surveys are always a primary way to do it. It gives you tangible evidence to how well you are performing as a business, as a channel. If one particular channel is performing well over another, is that caused by the experience, by the agents interacting with it? What's going on? So for an agent performance, CSAT always comes up. It's always vital to know how well a customer is responding to you and they're having things met. Everything else after that, I see some, I don't. I've seen AHT before. Are you keeping your calls under? Do you have targets? Utilization, so compared to any hour of the day or how long you've been online, how many interactions are you taking? It's the whole thing about productivity. Are you on? Are you available? Are you taking interactions? Are you dealing with them promptly? Are you being knowledgeable? First call resolution. Are you dealing with things straight away? And then move on to the next one, which is the ideal. So a lot of metrics look at that, but CSAT and quality are the two that universal, I would say.
The quality piece, and it's, I think, really important that you touched on this, to be able to be a customer on that journey when you're talking to an agent, to where the agent has been equipped with the necessary data to drive the conversation, to streamline it, but also maintain the human element. At the end of the day, people want to do business with people. And I think that has been a huge success that I've seen on our behalf, of being able to be nimble enough with how we're customizing, seeing the data to still allow them to be human beings. And I think it's really important that organizations understand that, as much as there's a lot of automation that can be involved in AI tools to essentially, what I would say, tee up the conversation, to have the quality be in its most favorable position, to be able to have an agent understand that there is going to be able to be many opportunities to serve a customer, but do it in such a way that allows them to still be who they are as a person. And it's interesting because the data that we're seeing, right, you have two different types of buckets. You got real time and you have historical. And real time is a very interesting conversation, because some people's needs of real time is much different than other people's needs. Do they need it within 5 seconds? Do they need it within 20 seconds? I would love for you to share a little bit more about how the dashboards that we create here at Emite, with the data that we're ingesting, how are we able to help with showing both a real-time scenario and a historical scenario to help with these agent scorecards?
So you're absolutely right about kind of the cadence differences, and agent scorecards, stay away from some of what we define as real-time elements. And when we talk about real-time, we talk about less than a second, within 5 seconds. It's those things at the moment they happen. And when most businesses might say, I need it within 5 seconds, I need it within 20, when they talk about real time, is they want to be able to see what's happening right this instant without looking at all their agents and their queues. How many interactions are in our queues? How long have they been waiting? My agents, what statuses are they in? What should they be in? Talk about scheduling and adherence. Where should they be? And are they adhering to that? Are they online? Are they available? Have they been on a call for a particular long time? Are they in run over in break? Because you can't just go person to manage where they are. So being able to quickly and easily see that without any delay, because the worst thing that happens is if you have a delay in that information, you go to challenge an agent saying, you've been in after call work for 20 minutes. And they go, no, I'm not. I was on another call a minute ago, because your data's out of date. And that's where it really comes from the real-time perspective, is the insights you're trying to drive. It's the split-second decisions. So the difference between real-time and historical is you're trying to understand trends. When you look at historical, you try to understand a aggregation of all the data. You try to look at trends, even across the entire day. But for real time, it's just a window into your operation right now so that you can make decisions now. And hopefully you have the data that lets you make informed and sensible decisions now, not decisions that when you look back at your historical data, you regret. Even later in the day, you go, we resourced this queue because we were worried about it. We added 5 people to it. You look 4 hours later and another queue bombed because you took staff off of it. So being able to see as much of that information as possible lets you make informed decisions. Then we talk about real time. That's really where that focus comes from. Customers have different interpretations, but that's really what they're trying. That universally is what they're trying to do with that information. Just depends how fast they want it. Scorecards and agent performance is to give as close to real time as possible, with the fact that we are having to perform aggregations and calculations. So we do have to take the data and we have to do something to it. So from an agent perspective, especially with something like a scorecard, it's usually across a monthly basis. So having it up to date within a minute is a nice to have, and it's not really necessary. Yeah. It's the idea that every time you take a call, it changes your utilization rate for the day, or every time you have a CSAT come in, it'll affect your CSAT score. Over the course of a day, that might be detrimental. You've had one bad CSAT. Across the month, where you're actually being targeted on,
right,
it all comes out in the wash. So that's why we still do it intraday, because for any given day and any given point, you want an agent, same as what we just talked about for managers, informed decisions based on the information. You want to provide the ability for agents to see that. When it's frustrating for an agent, and way back when I was an agent, and I have a similar experience of you trying to get performance, you trying to understand where you are and where you need to focus your efforts, and you don't have a clear picture about what you're doing well or what you're doing poorly until you get an update in 4 days' time at the start of a new week that says you struggled last week, and you go, if I knew that, I would have made certain efforts to improve in places I didn't realize I was struggling. And that's the kind of information you want to see up to date, so they can constantly be able to refresh that during the day, during the week, during the month. But that's really the difference. We talk about the cadence. You want it as quickly as possible, with the fact that if you found out that you'd had a CSAT 30 seconds ago, it's not really going to help you.
Yeah, sometimes the information, as much as we are experts in data analytics, that sometimes the data can lead to paralysis by analysis. You don't want to have an agent be so fixated on some of those reactionary moments of how the data is coming in when there's a bigger picture of a month view that's important for them to be measured on. So I think that's a really good point. And listen, when it comes to the conversations that I'm seeing with potential or current customers, the conversations that you're having with our internal team to help build custom solutions for emite customers, it all comes down to just the uniqueness of these use cases. And I know that you said that you had some examples and some things that you can share via screen that will help the listeners understand some of the use cases that we see, how we're able to uncover needs, align value accordingly, and along this data centralization and agent scorecard, I'd love for you to tap into what you're seeing in today's customers.
Yeah, of course. So I'll share my screen and I will try and describe as much as possible for listeners, but viewers should get a decent view. I've used screenshots for my example. I've stayed away from the live environments. And if you see the black bars, that's just me avoiding agent names. That's essentially what I'm doing, just removing them out. What I'm showing on screen right now is an example of a report, a balanced scorecard that was provided to us to say, this is what we currently do. And it was listed out by agent, and then these blue lines give you the manager for each of the groups of agents. And then underneath this, you have the different information that they have. So you've got adherence, so that's their adherence to schedule. So how much they've been scheduled to be in on call or on queue work for 4 hours, and were they logged in and in that state for that time. Utilization is looking at the interactions per hour. That's what I talked about before. It doesn't look at individuals, it looks at per hour. Is it broadly where it should be against their targets? CSAT, we talked about CSAT. So I'll take one step back. Adherence, we're getting that from Genesis. So this is a Genesis customer. They use Genesis as their primary CCaaS platform. Probably should have started with that. And adherence is coming from there. We ingest all the adherence and scheduling information. That's where that is. So that's where we're deriving that from. Utilization is the same thing. We have all their status time and all their interactions they handle, giving us utilization rate. CSAT is coming from Salesforce. Every interaction generates a CSAT automatically that goes out to the customer following any interaction that takes place. So CSAT is coming from Salesforce cases, as it is first-time resolution. So first-time resolution, I won't go into a lot of detail. It's incredibly hard for any business to track what a first-time resolution is. Some of them say, did the same email or phone number call back in within 5 days of having a wrap-up that was concluded? But did they call in about the same thing or something else? How do you know? Is it 3 days? Do you do it longer? What if they came in on a different channel? Then it's a repeat, but you don't know. This customer got around all of that by essentially having a question in their post-call survey saying, was your was your query resolved first time? They just asked the customer. It's a really elegant solution, but they've been using that long before emite. So cool, we don't have to recreate that. We don't have to create something new. We're just using what they've already got. Monitoring is their quality score. They've got it out of 5 here. So usually quality scores go out of 100 or 100%. They're doing it out of 5. But that is on the left is the raw scores. So when I say raw, that's just the calculation of their score for the agent for month to date. On the right is where it gets more complicated because they describe this as a balanced scorecard. And again, staying away from a lot of the maths, fundamentally what they're doing is they're weighting some of these elements more than others. So that's why, for example, first-time resolution on this customer is 100%, and their first-time resolution here, they're getting 15.38. So essentially, they have a first-time resolution target, and I think it's 90%, 80 or 90%, and then they have percent to target above that. Again, stay away from some of the maths because I don't think it's really helpful. The point is, they weight each of these things accordingly. So they go, utilization rate might it actually gives quite a high amount of the percentage. Adherence, generally, 10% is where they're looking to max everything out usually. So you go, if you're to your adherence, which is 85%, you get 10% for adherence. That's the max you can get. What actually happens for this example is if they go over 85% adherence, which is their target, they get slightly more. It scales accordingly. And the same thing happens with the others. Now, this is what they came to us with and said, we want to try and automate this. This is incredibly difficult for us to maintain and send out. We have to take data from Salesforce, data from Genesis, combine it all together, and it's really hard. Again, they have a single figure they're trying to generate.
Yep.
So I basically took all this information and I made this. So this, again, straight away, visually, it's much more appealing than just a grid view. And this allows you to filter by agent and by month, because again, this is aggregated on a month-to-month basis. So what it gives us is they actually broke theirs into branches. So some things count under 1. So under efficiency, they use adherence, average handle time to resolution, which its TTR is service level for them, basically. And then quality, CSAT, FTR, and quality. And this is what they asked for us to do. The big benefit, as well as being able to provide that, is they asked for a series of changes to what they were already doing, which made things incredibly more complicated, but we were able to achieve. They said, we don't want anyone to be able to overachieve. So you saw previously, 10% might have been the max. Some people were going over and getting 10.6 or something. They wanted to take that away and say, can you limit it? So if you get up to the target, you'll get the max and then you won't get anything above that. So no one can get more than 100 anymore. And vice versa. If someone goes under the lower bound, so now they have what's called upper and lower bounds. If you go underneath that, you get 0.
I see.
So they said, lower cap there, 65% for adherence. If you get adherence under 65, you will just get 0 here. You won't get the comparable amount. And then everything scales between that. So between 65 and 90, you'll get anywhere from 0 to 100% to target. Yeah, that's the math that's going to get more complicated than that. But adherence works like that. TTR works like that. CSAT, FTR, and QA all work like that. AHT is slightly different in just that it's flat, like you get it or you don't based on being over or under a target amount. That's the idea. So when you aggregate it to when you look at one particular agent, they'll either have 5% free AHT because they had a call at AHT under 7 minutes, or they don't. So it's 0 or 5.
Right.
All of this rolls up. So you see the weighting for this. You can see the weighting here, which is what we already talked about. They weight TTR, which is it's service level, so it's everyone's contribution gets the smallest amount because it's the hardest to affect as an agent. Whereas CSAT, customer experience, customer sentiment, is being given the highest weighting over everything else because that's a key component to the customer. So what this means is we provided this to the customer and agents are able to log in and access this whenever they want. And whenever they access it, all of these metrics will be up to date. So the information coming from Salesforce, CSAT, FTR, we pull that in every 30 minutes. I think that's a cadence that we do at the moment they're happy with, but it could be less if they wanted it. Everything else, adherence updates every 5 minutes. AHT updates every 5 minutes. Service level updates every 5 minutes. Quality updates every 30 minutes. And so that means really at any given point during the day, whenever you look at it as an agent, as a manager, it is up to date at the point that you're looking at it. We've had some managers who also want to schedule those, so they go out as an email to their team, for example, and say, here's yours, and you can have a review at any point. But the idea is that an agent can go in whenever they want and see all of the different metrics they're being targeted on and saying, where are you doing well and where are you struggling? And you don't have to say, how up to date is this? It's like, it's now, really. I said before, you don't have to have it in real time. But we get so close based on the nature of how we work anyway that we're not going to delay it for no reason. We're using the same data that we use across all of the platforms. So I say that AHT updates every 5 minutes. That's because agent metrics as a whole, we update every 5 minutes so that any agent for any reason or any manager can see all that information as close to real time as possible.
Yeah, being able, Stephen, to see this visually, and you just have such a unique perspective because you were an agent at one point. You've been in the trenches of what you're helping these customers and agents achieve by streamlining their data. You've experienced it firsthand. And I think it would be important to share what a powerful outcome we have here of a tool that is allowing efficiency, effectiveness, quality, all the things that we've outlined in the conversation today, to have it be right in front of your eyes at any given time of the day. You could see exactly what you need to see to continue to help drive the customer journey. But when it comes to what we were looking at before with how data was organized to what we're looking at now today based off of what we've designed at Emite, I'd love for you to talk about how long did it take this particular customer to work to get to the point to where they were aggregating that data the way that they were organizing it before. How long did it take them to do that to now, since it's more automated and streamlined and the outcome of today, how much time and money are they saving because of a platform like Emite?
So at a bare minimum, they take away an FTE of their reporting time, but they obviously split it out across multiple people. So they weren't all sharing it, but fundamentally their reporting team had that as a fixed requirement. I think they originally quoted us somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 hours or so originally on how to try and maintain that during a month after it had all been built. But any changes, update to incentive. And like I said, some of the things were fundamentally unachievable. The change to upper and lower bounds and the updates to some of these metrics, they weren't possible in what they were doing, or they didn't have the skill set to be able to do it. So the fact that we did it for them and they don't have to maintain it, it's already there, was obviously hugely beneficial. So you're taking away a lot of their maintenance effort from having to do it, but it's also that continuous effort. So whenever changes come up, we can apply those changes. Or if they come to us and say, we want to make fundamental changes to it, or we've got to update our targets, can we update this? You don't have to go back and we can update that same day and it'll reflect against their data. There isn't any kind of having to retrofit. It already works, nice and seamless.
I see. And this particular outcome that we were able to achieve, I'd love for you to talk about how flexible and nimble this data set is. I see numerous data blocks, but when it comes to this type of information, what are maybe some of the common adding or subtracting of the data blocks that you would see with a particular customer that you're helping with on this?
Yeah, so you're right. And the thing I will say is the visualization that you see here is based on a mock-up they provided to us. And that's happened with a lot of the reports that we provided for this customer is they came to us with visualizations that they had built, and we were able to get incredibly close in both color palette and formatting and sizing to be able to get what they want. What you tends to find out, like this one, everything right now is split into individual blocks. And there's a key reason for that is because you could get really fancy with different graphs and tables. But at the end of the day, for something like this, it's supposed to be clear, easy to read, and easily digestible. And status blocks like I've got here, big and bold. It's the same as when you put it up in an office TV and you might put like Q status up on a wallboard. Yes, you can add loads of like fancy graphs, but at the end of the day, for something like that, you need to be able to quickly see it and quickly identify what's going on. So for here, it's about the information it's giving, not so much how you're interpreting it. You're not interested in a trend line of your CSAT over the past 3 months. This, as it is right now, is what is my performance this month? And I just need a number. And that's the key of what they do with agent scorecards is that is the most important number for an agent, the total. And then these ones, it goes down in importance. So the fact that you can quickly and easily and see, you can see straight away that I'm under my target, I'm struggling, I'm behind. And then you go, okay, which one is worse? Which one am I more behind on? And then you look at down from there, which metric is really dragging me down? And when you look at the weighting, the reason why we have it here so they remember it is if you spend a considerable amount of effort trying to increase your FTR, it's compared to getting your CSAT back to where it should be, getting your adherence back to where it should be. These things are going to give you the incredible gains as an agent, which is why we just make sure that they can see that. They don't have to interpret the data. It's just, there it is. And I've got another example with a few slightly different use cases just to touch on briefly. And that's got similar designs and layout outcomes where you just go, we've got to make it visible. Everything else is superfluous.
Right.
It has to be visible. You have to make it nice and clear. So it looks simple, but that's because of the use case and it's needed like that.
Yeah, no, let's definitely take a look at it. I've heard visualize and visually pleasing come up often in the conversations that I'm having. Also, to this gamification piece, right? To where you're able to take these metrics, and if it's anything like me coming from an athletic background, I certainly like to have a competitive nature. And I could see how these scorecards can not only help an agent in an organization, but it can be incredibly motivational to know if you're hitting metrics, know if you're not hitting your metrics, and having good quality feedback to continue to, again, drive a positive customer journey.
And it's a fair point because this example, a conversation we had with this customer and the other one was we can separate this data so that any agent can only see their data. We'd have to give very specific, that's your scorecard. You'll only ever see yours. You can't look at anyone else's. But both businesses that we worked with wanted to give the opportunity for the agents to see other agents' information. Because I think the cynical approach initially is you don't want agents snooping, you don't want agents seeing when someone else is struggling, and you don't want that to be an uncomfortable kind of thing that's out there that this person's failing quite dramatically.
Sure.
I think by and large, it goes the other way, like what you said about competition, about friendly rivalry, about the fact that you want the achievers to push each other. If you've got people that are failing, that's an entirely different problem. And your problem when you're failing as an agent is not that other people know you are.
Yeah, critique private, and in public you praise, right? So being able to, even if an agent is failing, you have the data in the background to where when you have that monthly conversation and ways to improve, that you can do it in a way as a supervisor that allows them to be encouraged by the data, knowing, hey, here's where you are, here's where you can go, And then going back to that gamification piece, then they're back with the agent count, going after their goals and celebrating those successes in that kind of real time environment as well. So there's ways to help agents improve in that private critique state with the data, but also too as a team to encourage and motivate each other in a real time scenario.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to just briefly show, just make sure I catch the other use case because it's slightly different, but the same kind of things apply in that you're trying to give a single view. The difference we have with the next one is not that. I went the wrong order. Is this one. So this one is the big key difference here is this is primarily for agent incentives. This is a business that takes bookings for theme parks, interactions, things like that. And each agent is targeted on how much they take initially it was across different groupings of activities that they do. Alongside that, you have their total calls that they take. So we're getting their sales results actually from 3 different places. It comes from some on-premise PBX systems that they provide data into Tableau for. We take it from Genesis IVR payments and Amazon Pay for payments as well. So you take all the different, and they all come together. We have their calls coming from Genesis. It's another Genesis customer. Quality and CSAT also coming from Genesis. So they do CSAT, Genesis post-call surveys in Genesis. And then we have some different steps about what they're supposed to do. So the way it works is Quality and CSAT have essentially, did you achieve or did you not? And if you did, it increases your incentive calculation that you're eligible to get as a monetary value. If you fail on both of them, you just become ineligible. So these are yes or no categories. But the rest of it, what they did is they said, okay, here's how much an agent took, for example, in a given month. And here's how many calls they took in that given month. And then they initially, when they came to us first time, they assumed a 6% conversion based on their previous data for all of their interactions. So it cascades out from there. If you take this much money and you take this many calls and you assume that, so if you assume that you convert 6% of your calls, and based on all the interactions and bookings that have been done, you have an average amount. So here you've got an asset average. So here's your asset that you're dealing with. Here's the average sale of that asset. So you work everything else itself. So if that's the average for this month, 1997, and then you go assume you convert 6% of your total calls. So that's how many calls you should be converting on. And if you convert at the average of each of them, that's your sales target.
I see.
So that's what's actually happening. And then you go percentage of target achieved, did they achieve quality and CSAT, and it gives the actual incentive. The maths in the background is more complicated. There is banding. They can't achieve any more than 4,000 AED. It's a Middle Eastern customer. They can't achieve any more than that. So this person is 500% to target on this given month. It's irrelevant. They don't keep scaling. And this is how they wanted us to achieve it initially. And we did that. Fundamentally changed what they were doing. That one, the first one, is incredibly more complex for them to maintain. One person was basically looking after that report all the time.
Wow.
And providing the data in. So the change we got here is, again, what I talked about. It's clear. It's easy to understand. They don't have to care about a lot of the calculations. We're doing it in the background. You go, okay, the month I'm looking at, certain agent, my percent to target for this month, how much am I payable on, where's my quality CSAT, handle call, all the different stuff they need to see. Also, my sales target, and where am I achieving. The last thing to mention about this customer is the step up in complexity that they saw as an opportunity because of emite. So once you did this, they came and said, we assume 6% for all of our different sales assets. So they've got different groupings because they're different locations and things like that. And we assume 6% flat across the board. And then we might change that. And they did change that to say 8% eventually. But they came to us and said, what if we were to dynamically work out the conversion rates for each of those assets as the month goes along? So if we do a particularly large amount of volume or great conversion on one channel, that should reflect against the averages accordingly, and it should adjust people's targets accordingly. And that's exactly what we've done. So instead of doing the static version, which was all they were able to maintain, as the month goes along, if you have calls against one of these asset types and bookings against them, that will constantly be working out what the current average is for that asset group. Because the other kind of byproduct is that is previously they had to say an agent primarily looked after one group over another. It's this bit, primary asset. So this person would be targeted on their average of the YC asset. Instead, they've asked us to change that so that their sales target is the conversion percentage of YC that they dealt with, plus it'll be a different conversion amount and a different call volume they took for LED and a different one they took for ADMM. Each of those will have their own averages of sales and their own target. So now an agent has a sales target, which is a combination of all of those things together. I'm getting a little bit into the weeds, but the fundamental change is they call it dynamic conversion. They don't have to assume flat 6% for everything. They essentially saw emite as an opportunity to say, can you work this out for us so that every time someone reviews the report, every time someone looks at it, all of those calculations happen. We work out the dynamic conversion, we apply it to the volume the agent actually took, we see what their sales target is based on that, and then we see how much revenue they got and their percent to target. And that dynamically works for the entire month. So you'll see your target change as the month goes along, but that's exactly what they wanted to happen. So it's always reflective of what's actually happening, and they're not making or losing sales or revenue or incentive based on some assumptions which might be out of date.
Yeah, Stephen, you drive home a good point, and I know that there's a lot of nuances in the data here, but it's important to understand, again, this concept of the power of having a 360-degree view of agent performance and all of the moving parts that either agents or supervisors or organizations are trying to navigate. And that leads to just really some key takeaways of this conversation around agent scorecard, around data centralization. And I just would be curious, based off of looking at the big picture, how does surfacing these actionable insights from these data sources help organizations drive informed decision making to enhance overall performance in their contact centers?
Yeah, it ends up being quite a simple proposition. The more visibility they have of these different elements in ways that they can easily ingest and utilize is what lets them drive decisions. So there's a lot of words to say. The more information they're armed with and the easier it is to see it, the better decisions they can make. I said before, you try and make informed, intelligent decisions during the day and hope that they are the right decisions, and you'll see that come out after the fact. And that's what happens in real time is you based on previous examples and experience, you go, this should have a positive impact, and you still have to hope that happens. The more information that you have, the more ability to understand, how does this work previously? How is everything interacting now? And again, you're not limited to one data source or another. Wherever you have data you're trying to utilize, emite is able to help with that. We have a super in-house proprietary system that has data in it that our agents utilize all the time, but we don't see the usage data of how much they're doing in there. You go, okay, can we get access to it? If you've got APIs, can we get the data? And then we'll put it alongside everything else. And all of a sudden it's not a mystery box anymore. You have that data alongside everything else. It's not sat behind a product team, behind a data team who's having to manage it. We can ingest it, put it into emite, give you the same tools, the same visualization tools you've already seen, and say, you can now surface that data however you wish. It's not locked behind that region, behind that team. And that's really the key takeaway, the key driver. There's another key customer who they have offices across the world that we service under emite, and they have instances across many of those territories of themselves. And they have some systems that previously, before emite, they said we had no visibility. We just trusted the operations in that region to tell us what was happening. Now we ingest that information. They ingest that information in. It's the first time they've seen a dashboard of that in the centralized real-time team, and now they get a true representation of what's happening. You're not relying on individual operations, on individual regions. You bring everything in, you're stopping that siloing and centralizing that data to really firm up that point that the access to the data is what drives the other decisions. People who work in contact centers are intelligent and they're informed and they know how to make correct decisions when they have reliable data. So the important thing for us is to surface that data and that insights and allow those really intelligent people to do what they do best.
It's well said, Stephen. I know that you've seen a lot. Those 2 use cases was incredibly helpful to understand some of the powers and actions that we can take here at Emite to help maximize data centralization, put it into a one-stop shop dashboard, helping organizations thrive. And with that said, when it comes to just this process of how you've been able to help a customer through this journey of building what you've built out, can you maybe just give a high level of what it looks like to do business with Emite once they start working with our consulting team? How long did it take to generate some of these opportunities that we've seen today?
So some of the scorecards take a good long while. It takes 3 to 6 months when it really got everything up and running. But that isn't the first time you had anything to utilize and access was at the end of that time. Like I said, each example I provided, they had initial requirements. Then unlocking the power of Emite, they go, okay, can we do this? It provides new opportunities. The thing about the consulting team that we always try to do is that when you get into the weeds of this and the nuance is that we just try to live and breathe it to really understand what's happening with the customer. Like I said, I've been in contact centers for a long time. Yes, I was an agent. I've been on telephony change as a dialer manager. I've been in that world. So when a customer comes to us with these requirements, it's to help understand, one, why. So you don't always have to have what you already had. Is there a better way to surface that? But when you've got things like this with a lot of steps and very complex, is to really dig into it and be able to unpick all of that. We become very well acquainted with the stakeholders because we have numerous calls and a good relationship to be able to go through that to really help understand not only what you have, how do we get that to serve in Emite, but also what are the decisions that went into how this report looks now. And at the end of it, what you find is you can go to that consultant and they will absolutely understand the ins and outs of your business, because we're a smaller organization, but what that means is you always have the same consultants. We're not serviced by a gigantic team. Each area globally has their own team that supports, and it means that you really get to know the same few consultants and they will know your business. There isn't a lot of repeating yourself to new stakeholders because you've been passed off. What happened with both these customers, I was on their onboarding. I went through their pre-sales, their onboarding, and then as these projects came about, I did the scoping, I worked alongside their stakeholders, I put it live, I did any adjustments and changes for them, and now they're in BAU and they go live. And all that was supported by me. And now they have questions about it. They still have my email address and they know how to get hold of me.
Yeah, again, a unique perspective that you have, both being an agent in the past and now designing solutions for contact centers and organizations around the world. With that said, Stephen Smith, thank you so much for taking some time today on the Emite podcast to walk us through the importance of Agent Scorecard, how to maximize data centralization. And when it comes to doing business with us, I highly suggest checking out our website, emite.com. There's a great contact us button. There's no harm, no foul to go on, request a demo, understand that we're here to answer any questions. We're here to understand your business better, and more importantly, align value to where we can help see fit. And outside of that, Stephen, when it comes to the solution consulting team and the best way to get a hold of you, I will provide that information in the podcast notes. And again, I cannot thank you enough for your time and joining me today.
Thanks very much, Kollman.
Excellent.
Thank you for tuning in to the Emite podcast. We hope that you enjoyed our deep dive into the analytics with Emite. For more information, visit our website, www.emite.com. There you will find articles, case studies, and an exclusive blog post expanding on today's discussion. Feel free to contact us through our website for any questions or insight you'd like to share. Stay curious and keep exploring the data-driven world.